authoritative channel.
It is the world's most popular illegal substance, with hundreds of thousands of tons sold and smoked every year. And if Uhuru Kenyatta's government has anything to do with it, then marijuana will now be in the crosshairs of the police in trying to stamp out drug trafficking in Kenya. Tonight, we delve into the marijuana debate, but in a different way. I'm John Alanamu, and this is Perspective, and the show starts right now. In Kenya, marijuana has traditionally been a taboo subject. Smoking of marijuana has been associated with the descent of the smoker into a world of vices, eventually ending up with mental illness. But are the popular notions of what marijuana is true? As Kenyans debate the illegal drug culture in Kenya, we're looking at one aspect of the conversation, the debate on decriminalization. It's taken us a bit of time to convince the people here to let us onto their farms. But we're finally on the way. Hopefully we see something that proves that marijuana growing, marijuana farming, ganja farming is very popular here. Just to let you know where we are, we're somewhere in Tanzania, just across from MIGORI. Before we get to the farm though, there's a backstory to why we're here.
Bust involving students in school uniform.
In isolation, this would look like a case of high school truants experimenting with an illegal and, in the public's eyes, dangerous drug. But if you expand the subject of marijuana use to a global level, then the story of marijuana becomes one with more than just one side to it.
A handful of African-American pastors have endorsed Initiative 502, Washington's so-called marijuana legalization bill.
We asked for your view on our text poll, and it's been a blowout. 95% favor legalizing pot to bring in tax revenue.
In Kenya, though, this is what you're likely to see. The law and order response to what is the world's most popular illegal substance.
Hata neno bangi kutajwa ovyo ovyo linaleta mshangao kwa wengi.
ADC later displayed a few sacks of bud.
Yet this plant, which evokes such deep and drastic opinions, has a more diverse effect on Kenyan society than even 1,000 news clips about yet another arrest could ever capture.
Leo ndio nimeiona mara yangu ya kwanza. Kusikia nasikiaga kuna bagi imepandwa, lakini leo ndio nimeiona kaa inamea.
But this is all we hear and all we see. So it remains unresolved, not discussed, underfoot, an issue that the police will handle, or a non-issue. But by looking at the sheer volume of bang that enters the country, that couldn't be further from the truth. All one has to do to disprove the notion that marijuana isn't an issue is to look at the business of bang in the country. Something quite difficult to do in Nairobi. The capital is seen more as a retail market for marijuana and gives just one perspective to the business. So we left Nairobi. And headed west. To the lakeside border county of MIGORI. MIGORI is an important piece in the marijuana puzzle, owing to the numerous interceptions of large amounts of the drug by the police. It's fabled that farmers on both sides of the border rely more on their illegal produce than on more mainstream crops like maize. We arrive at a small outpost of the county lying right on the border between Kenya and Tanzania called Motemorabu. Watching life unfold here, there isn't much that distinguishes Motemorabu from many other such villages across the country. Electricity just made it here a couple of months ago, and the fertile soils of MIGORI feed much of the economy here. But as much as we're watching this town slowly yield to the passing day, they are watching us. It's an open secret that all around us, on both sides of the border, marijuana grows and flourishes, adding that extra coin to a small village economy. A local marijuana middleman connects us to a farmer on the Tanzanian side of the border. There are no border officials here, so a hop onto a border will get us there quickly. Barely 5 minutes into the ride, I'm told to disembark. Soon, we're on the farm. At first, all I can see is maize. But the farmer asks me to look a little closer to the ground. A green haze interrupts the view of the maize growing in straight furrows. We hadn't noticed, but we're in the middle of a 1-acre farm with marijuana growing in higher density than the maize. The farmer doesn't have any large marijuana plants growing here. He harvested his crop about 2 months ago and immediately planted more. In about 4 months, this farm will yield about 100,000 shillings from marijuana alone, far more than the farmer will get from maize. He says just about everybody here grows marijuana in varying quantities. There's an order to this business. Most of the people in this locality are ganja outgrowers. Aside from the produce kept for individual consumption, all of this marijuana is meant for the Kenyan market. A middleman will then pay for transport, and the marijuana will be driven into Kenya past MIGORI, headed towards major towns. Nairobi and Mombasa are the biggest markets for the marijuana grown in MIGORI. By the time it gets into a smoker's hands, the marijuana here will have leapt in value from about 10 shillings a marijuana cigarette to between 50 and 70 shillings per cigarette. This is where the big bucks in bang are made. But if you're digging for the numbers when it comes to the amount of bang, both in monetary value and in weight, that comes into Kenya from this region, the best place to look would be the MIGORI Divisional Police Headquarters.
We got it on 22nd this week.
The officer commanding this police division, Alfred MAKOMA, starts with the number of vehicles he has sitting at the station that were impounded because they were being used to traffic marijuana. And the value of the bang that was netted is staggering.
Yeah, so that's 12.8 million. Yeah, and we have some which have been released by court orders.
Traffickers usually hire vehicles to transport bang, and the actual owners of the vehicles use what MAKOMA calls a lacuna in the Narcotic and Psychotropic Substances Control Act to get their cars released.
If the person says that he didn't know that his car was to be used, then there's a provision, and I think this is what the judiciary and the crooks are using.
Now, the police have given us access to yet another storeroom that's half full with marijuana. This particular one is what they call a bale of marijuana. This is worth 240,000 shillings in the marijuana market. It kind of makes you think about the popularity of this drug countrywide. This particular bale of marijuana was part of a haul that was on its way to Mombasa when it was caught. In trying to bring the point about trafficking and a judiciary that is slow to dispense with these cases home, MAKOMA shows us one last storeroom.
Let's walk in.
You can't walk in.
How? Not unless you want me to throw you up there.
This would be a drug trafficker's dream. A room literally bursting at the seams with marijuana.
This is approximately 50 million. collected over a period of about 2 to 3 years.
By simple math, if a vehicle like this carries a load worth 2 million shillings, then the police have stored in this evidence room 25 carloads of marijuana.
This is purposely for this stuff. We built this one purposely for this stuff. We have other stores for other exhibits in our buildings.
It's a lot of marijuana for one police station to hold, but this is just a fraction of what actually gets past the police. There is a strong business argument for farmers and traffickers in this region who have turned to marijuana. And quite ironically, this argument grows side by side with mainstream plants. The current price of a 100 kilogram bag of maize is 3,333 shillings. 100 kilograms of marijuana herb, going by the MIGORI OCPD's figures and street value, is worth 1 million shillings. Even if you take into account bribes, transport, and the risk involved, the value of marijuana to those involved in the business far outweighs that of other mainstream cash crops. Even against one of Kenya's most famous cash crops, coffee, marijuana still does a lot better. 100 kilograms of coffee, according to the 2012 economic survey, cost about 33,000 shillings. If you add the amount of time that it takes for coffee berries to be plucked against the plant to harvest period for marijuana, it still is a no contest. Marijuana plants grow for 4 to 6 months before the herb is cultivated, whereas coffee berries are harvested over a 2 to 3 month period once a year. Marijuana also grows in a number of varied environments. As long as the economics of marijuana hold, then MAKOMA and the police force will find it extremely difficult to end the trafficking of the drug.
This is a business for big people. And at any scissor, any arrest, we recover a good number of kilograms, which indicates that they are in great demand.
And despite MAKOMA's assertions to the contrary, we're told that an officer that stops a vehicle carrying marijuana could attract a bribe of anywhere between 10,000 shillings and 100,000 shillings, depending on the amount being trafficked. It's a long road ahead for MAKOMA in bringing an end to marijuana trafficking that, given the amounts of the drug that passed through his town, is for certain. But what if the need to fight marijuana didn't exist because it was decriminalized or legal in Kenya? I raised the issue of the international debate on the effects of marijuana with him. He is unequivocal.
Let me tell you now.
Yeah.
I've seen young men going zubi. That is, they cannot do extremely nothing because of taking this stuff. And I can take you to my rural home. Kuonyeshe huyu ameisha, huyu anaisha, huyu ajui kesho, huyu ajui tomorrow.
Those are the assertions that are being fought in the smoldering debate on decriminalization of ganja. That's how the business of bang is conducted in Kenya. But up next, we hear the varied opinions on the issue. Said the laws of supply and demand are all around you. But when it comes to drug trafficking, and particularly when it comes to marijuana trade, this gateway town from Tanzania into Kenya is all about supply. Some businesses, though, choose the cover of darkness to contribute to Migori's economy, whether you are buying or selling. The business of bang is one such trade. We've arranged to speak to a couple of people who know about marijuana to find out what the allure is from the demand point of view. This is Nate, not his real name. He's a second-year student at a local university studying to be an engineer. He tells me that he does pretty well in school, but that he's a long-term marijuana smoker.
I started smoking marijuana some 10 years ago. That is...
How old were you then?
I was about 10 years old.
He's aware of the fact that marijuana is an illegal substance in Kenya, but is also aware of the political, social, and more recently, the medical arguments around marijuana. Ndo iko na reputation mbaya ati watu wanachizi. Are you afraid that after all of these years of smoking, that would happen to you?
Tintachizi. hiyo reputation sa sijui au chukuliaje, sijaidiwaje. Imekuwa poa sahi in second year.
But Nate's argument about marijuana is gaining credence in circles that would know if marijuana made you crazy. Dr. Lukoye ATWOLI would fit right in with these circles. Popular beliefs about marijuana, about cannabis. Are they true?
No. No. In fact, in my practice, for instance, most of the relatives who bring young people who are developing mental illness will tell me, we think this young man is using cannabis. Almost all of them, after I do an interview and assess them, I find that they have had a mental illness for long before they were exposed to cannabis and before they started using cannabis. People who are predisposed to mental illness or people who have mental illness are more likely to use cannabis than people who do not have mental illness. And therefore the association would be the other way around. So we are blaming cannabis unfairly in my view.
ATWOLI's argument for decriminalization also stems from his research into the effect of marijuana and other illegal substances.
A study we did at the drug rehab in Madari, we didn't publish it, but we found that majority of the people, more than 2/3 of the people admitted in the rehabilitation center in Madari Hospital have another mental illness. Almost none of them was dependent on cannabis. You would say, yes, they have used cannabis. They will tell you the last time I used was 3 months ago. But alcohol, the last time I used was yesterday. The last time I smoked was this morning. You know, so cannabis, the problems associated with cannabis are overhyped.
KAGUTHI be counted out because he is not going to compromise.
But the argument for decriminalization moves no one less than the man who founded the national campaign against alcohol and drug abuse.
Kenyans be warned by that debate decriminalizing banking. To me, I will equate it to eating our own intestines as a country. Like alcohol, I will not want anybody to teach your daughters and your sons how to drink alcohol in moderation. I will call that particular teacher, professional, psychiatrist, doctor, name quack. It's a quack.
What I'm saying is backed by research evidence. What I'm saying is not an opinion. Go to our many hospitals, or mental hospitals in this country, and show me one person who's admitted with cannabis dependence. I would publish that in a medical journal if I found a patient like that.
Whereas he does admit that marijuana has no physiological addictive effects, he views it as a window into a world of vices.
In football, there is a character who distributes balls. Anaitwa number 6. It is banking. It increases consumption of alcohol, consumption of cigarettes, but it also introduces you to other drugs.
Ukichoma, does it make you feel like you need to drink or use something else?
Kichoma. Ni kitu tu smoke tu kishachoma utaya. Haidokupeleka kwa tei.
KAGUTHI's arguments echo one that played a major role in the criminalization of marijuana in the United States in 1937. One that was made into a movie called Reefer Madness. Reefer is one of the many aliases of marijuana.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide.
It's a focusing drug. It is not physiologically addictive. It's only psychologically addictive. And that's why the society is in big danger.
A gateway drug has certain characteristics. It has to be commonly available and easily available and probably legal for it to be a gateway drug. And this is alcohol and tobacco.
For close to 100 years, many of the world's nations, including Kenya, have banned the use of marijuana because of its psychoactive properties or the effects that occur when a person either ingests or smokes it and gets high. But in recent years, medical research has it that one negative property of marijuana may be just part of many, possibly hundreds of positive probabilities for the medicinal use of cannabis.
There are about 3,000 published articles on cannabis alone. Okay, most of them to revive the medicinal values, to bring back the good image of cannabis.
Abi Yenesew is a professor of chemistry at the University of Nairobi.
Best example.
But he is one of the few scientists in the region who have penned literature that speaks to marijuana's medical properties.
You get pure compounds.
He's not an outright advocate for decriminalization, but at least for medical purposes, he thinks that the criminalization of marijuana throws the baby out with the bathwater.
And there are over 500 compounds reported. I assure you, that shows the interest. Most medicinal plants, chemists will get 5, 6, at most 10, and they move to something else, okay?
He too asserts something that is up for constant challenge.
And this is only 1 out of 500. And they also say, even this bad one, if you call it, there's no clinical reports of deaths by even overconsumption of smoking of bang.
But a few doors down, the academic who was his lecturer holds a far less liberal view about the effects of marijuana.
If you liberalize anything dangerous too much, somebody is going to abuse it. The number of people going to abuse it are going to increase.
Dr. Jacob Midiwo says that the key to understanding marijuana's harmful effects is in understanding how the most active compound of marijuana works. That compound is called tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC.
THC works by penetrating tissue around the brain and acting on brain cells. Okay, the tissue around the brain is mostly fatty cells, and is called the blood-brain barrier. It protects the brain.
Any drug, right, to have an effect, be it a positive effect or a negative effect, has to pass the barrier. It has to enter, okay?
Interestingly, it is this very same property that Midiwo says is dangerous that he's trying to use to develop what could be a revolutionary medicine.
We are trying to chemically hook up tetrahydrocannabinol to an antibiotic so that it behaves as a vehicle to transport antibiotics into the brain.
They both agree, though, that the bridge of recreational use of marijuana is one that Kenya is not yet ready to cross.
We have not understood it in this country or in Africa. The side effects completely to allow the use. What they still advocate is the debate should continue.
So, what is Kenya's best bet in an argument against marijuana? Fortunately for anti-marijuana activists, it is one that binds far more people together than many scientific arguments: morality. And KAGUTHI knows this, mixing both the medical argument against the plant with one that would tug at many people's conscience.
Anything that is banned, you will not see it approved at the moral level, spiritual level, by either the Christians, I would be surprised, by the Muslims, by the others. They will know. You as a father would hate to see your daughter with that kind of freedom, because you know that freedom is definitely dangerous.
But how long will KAGUTHI's and many other Kenyans' saving grace in the crusade against ganja stand? Especially against the tide of marijuana meant for the Kenyan market that the police are struggling to stem.
Ironically, they say, we finish the market, they will not cultivate.
What of an economic argument that puts other mainstream crops in the weeds as far as money goes? Or the scientific arguments that are gaining credence here?
I do not see as much harm related to recreational use of cannabis as that related to other drugs.
It's a difficult subject, marijuana. Is Kenya ready to handle it? But as time passes, only Kenyans will be able to determine in their country whether the clouds of smoke from marijuana herald bad times ahead or good luck. On that note, we wind up Perspective for this week, but you can continue the conversation with us. Send us your feedback on our show handle at KTN Perspective or tweet me at John Allen Namu. We look forward to keeping your week in perspective same time next week. I'm John Allen Namu. Have a good night.